Hello, and welcome to HatTrick. Happy holidays. This is our very special look back at the 2021 year in sports. We had our last episode of the season last week. This week is a very special episode. We have compiled three of our favorite topics. Braydon, Elliott, and I have gone back into the archives and picked three topics, one each, that we really feel captures what the year was like, or maybe something we just thought was a lot of fun. Each of us will introduce our own topic for you, and you can listen back and remember what the year was like. Elliot will take it away first. Here he goes.
All right, up first is the conversation. I think a really important one. It's back on from the show that we released on November 1st. So not that long ago, but one that I'm choosing for two reasons. One, because I thought it was a really strong segment, and it had one of my favorite guests hosts on. Two, because we as a show have made a commitment to continuing the conversation around how sports need to be doing better. And I wanted to use this as an opportunity. If I was going to replay a segment, I wanted to replay one that talked about that, so that it remains fresh in people's minds. So what I'm talking about is a conversation between Jordan Larice and myself about the Blackhawks sexual assault scandal. It was very, very raw. We had only just received the report, I think that Thursday or Friday, and we recorded on the Sunday. And there was information still coming out as we were recording the episode. And I think that rawness and that frustration and that anger over what we learned in the report about the Chicago Blackhawks is really present in that conversation. But I think it speaks to our passion for this game that we love and this sport that we love, and our demand. It was us demanding better of those that run it, and so we'll start with something a little bit more somber, but I think an important conversation, and the types of conversations I'm looking forward to continuing to have in 2022 as we start to change the culture of sports.
Okay, so just before we start this, I just want to give a quick warning. Some of the things we're going to discuss in this conversation may be triggering to some people. We will discuss sexual violence, sexual assault, and we wanted to offer an opportunity for you to first, if you feel like this is something you're not comfortable with, definitely, step away from this conversation. And of course, at all times, most importantly, if you are the victim of sexual assault in any situation, just call 911, get help, report it. So with that, we'll start our conversation. So obviously, the biggest news coming out of the NHL this week has been the revelation and the continuing development in the sexual assault cover-up and scandal surrounding the Blackhawks. We had a good long conversation about this a few months back after some of the great reporting by TSN's Rick Westhead, who has really been at the forefront of reporting and uncovering this story. There was an unidentified player who had stepped forward with a lawsuit against the Chicago Blackhawks organization, citing a incident in 2010 during the Stanley Cup playoffs where he reported to a member of the staff that he had been sexually assaulted by a member of the coaching staff. That was Brad Aldridge, who at the time was their video coach. He reported this, and then there was subsequent reporting that the organization had held secret meetings discussing this and basically agreed to cover up the incident and not report it. These conversations seemed to be right at the top of the organization, general management, and perhaps even up to ownership. This week on Wednesday, Kyle Beach stepped forward as John Doe, revealing himself to be the player at the heart of this lawsuit. Incredibly brave, incredibly courageous by Kyle Beach to step forward. He spoke with Rick Westhead on TSN in a very frankly, hard to watch and hard to listen to interview. Someone who's obviously been suffering through trauma from this incident for over a decade now, and has been the subject of so much innuendo and rumor because, again, as until he stepped forward himself, it was unclear who it was. But he himself has obviously had to be dealing not only with the original trauma, but now this as the new reporting has brought it all back up to the surface. Obviously, it reignites that trauma for him. So first and foremost, unbelievable courage on his behalf. This was right at the same time that the investigation that had been conducted into the situation with Chicago was coming to light. Stan Bowman, the general manager of the Chicago Blackhawks now, and at that time resigned this week following the revelations in that investigation. Several other members of the organization, including Al McIsaac, stepped down. A few days after, Gary Bettman arranged meetings with both Kevin Cheveldayoff of the Winnipeg Jets, who was at the time the assistant general manager in Chicago, as well as Joel Quenneville, who was the head coach of the Chicago Blackhawks in 2010. Following his conversation with Joel Quenneville resigned as the head coach of the now Florida Panthers. And following his conversation with Gary Bettman, it was determined that Kevin Cheveldayoff's involvement did not merit resignation. We can discuss that in a second. And following all of this, the last sort of step the NHL has taken thus far is that Gary Bettman has spoken directly to Kyle Beach, offered full financial support for anything trauma-wise, counseling-wise, support-wise he needs moving forward. But obviously, he still has an active lawsuit against the Chicago Blackhawks, who are still very much in damage control at this point. Many of the players that were on that organization, none of whom have been disciplined in any way, have come forward with different levels of response, I guess we'll put it that way. That's a long, sort of as much detail as I am prepared to sort of lay out for you for those who are not in the loop on this. But let's get into it here, Elliott. I'm sure you had many responses and reactions when you first heard this news. You've had a few days to digest it. Where are you with all of this right now?
Well, first, let me speak on your guys' behalf as well, because I know you feel the same way about this. I just want to commend the bravery of Kyle Beach coming forward. That's an immensely difficult thing to do, what he did this week, to move forward with the lawsuit, but also to come out publicly and talk about his experience. I just want to acknowledge the bravery in that to start. And I think I speak for all of us on the show, Braydon included, when we, commend him for that as a podcast. Digesting, it's an interesting word. I don't know that I fully digested this. I want to start by saying, I'm glad that we're taking this seriously as a show, and we're putting all the resources and time into it to talk about it today. But I think that this is an ongoing conversation. I think that we're not done here yet. There's still a lot of questions that are left unanswered. And one of the things that I think I'm committed to as an NHL fan and as someone who has a medium to speak, is to continue to push this forward. Just because Joe Quenneville is no longer working, and a number of individuals, as you mentioned, aren't working, doesn't mean that this is over. And frankly, I think that we need to continue to drive this conversation. I am deeply disappointed in Cheveldayoff and where that has ended. I felt his statement in July was lawyer speak, and he positioned himself to get out of this. But he knew. And just because you're not in a powerful position in an organization doesn't mean you didn't know where the end consequences were. And this is not about workplace, or it's about just doing the right thing. So I have major issues with that. I think I was incredibly disappointed with the Edmonton Oilers and Duncan Keith. I thought his response was unacceptable. I found all of the responses from the players in this team, Kane, Taves, all of them incredibly disappointing. Everyone looking out for themselves, but there was clearly workplace behaviors and inappropriate stuff that was done afterwards that is unacceptable. And so that's a conversation that needs to be had. I also think there's a giant void for me in terms of the players union. The players union said virtually nothing, and I don't understand why that is. And it just feels to me like there's a lot more shoes to drop and a lot more people looking to distance themselves or take care of their own interests rather than doing what's right. So you might be able to tell from my tone, I'm a little pissed off.
Louise?
Yeah, I'm pretty angry. I think Elliott was very, very articulate and eloquent in his anger, and I may be less so. I think Taves' response was bullshit. I think Kane's was as well. Not shocking. I am furious that the Blackhawks put out a legal speak apology, but continue to, fight a lawsuit that they know they're in the wrong for. I think Duncan Keith's response was safe and embarrassing. I think Tippett's response was safe and embarrassing and old boys club. I think there are very few people who have come out and eloquently or emotionally or with heart spoke to this. Tyson Barrie is one person I feel has tried to speak in a way that is empathetic and compassionate. I was impressed with Taylor Hall's response. I'm not Taylor Hall's biggest fan. Everyone is aware of that, but I was impressed with Taylor Hall's response for calling out an old boys club mentality. It's systemic. It's prevalent in the NHL. As a woman, the experience I have had online when things come up, the Braydon situation and responding to that, and things when I have sort of expressed my discomfort as a woman or as a person who might not be a typical NHL fan for most people. The responses I get back are negative, disgusting, horrific sometimes. And so, yeah, I'm really freaking angry right now. And I haven't digested it. It's just sitting right now in the anger.
Yeah. I think both of you articulated a lot of the same things I'm feeling right now. I think what's frustrating is that it took this long. That's the thing that I think bothers me the most, is that all of the apologies, all of the placating, and all of the sort of like as much of it's legal jargon, as much as it's PR, all of it it's just too little too late. I mean, this should have been dealt with a decade ago. This should have been dealt with the day after. The fact that Brad Aldridge went on a Stanley Cup parade with the Stanley Cup is an absolute farce. The fact that he then went and assaulted another child because the Blackhawks didn't prevent that from happening to protect their own organization. At what cost? At what cost, right? There's absolutely, and we joked a little bit with each other on the last episode about the Astros and the $5 million fine. The NHL fined the Chicago Blackhawks $2 million. $2 million.
Yes.
Right? Less than they make at one home game. I mean, that is an insult. And maybe it's because they're not yet done. Maybe there's still more investigation to be done. But for me, it just shows, again, this lack of seriousness in this situation. Where's the accountability? Where's the actual, we have all of this lovely PR around this sports for everybody. And we have, rainbow tape, and we have all of these inclusivity initiatives. And yet there's no actual follow through when this kind of behavior is allowed to happen. Not just the sexual violence part of it, but clearly the misogyny and homophobia that was rampant in that room that came out in this investigation, the toxic masculinity that was a part of this, just the absolutely disgustingly toxic culture surrounding that organization. And frankly, that is probably prevalent in many of those locker rooms and is not being dealt with because the NHL doesn't have the teeth, or chooses not to use the teeth to actually hold them accountable when you have an obvious and like clearly evidence-based investigation that has laid out the facts behind this. There are many people associated with this organization who are just going to walk completely free of any form of consequence. I don't know what the consequence is for the players in the conversation around whether or not they knew or not. They knew at some point and still said nothing. That's still something that has to be considered. If you know that someone has been sexually assaulted a year after they happen and you do nothing to support that person or report it, are you not still just as responsible as people who knew 2 days after? I mean, that's just the reality of it. If you know this is happening and not, especially when you then find out later that Brad Aldridge has committed another crime that you are aware of, literally charged and convicted of, and you know that this person had a pattern of behavior before that affected another human being and you do nothing about it, that says something much deeper to the core of the problem that we're not dealing with. And I think the NHL, you can pat the NHL on the back for some of the things they're trying to do here, but that's all it is. It's just placating. You're just patting them on the back. There's no actual, that they shouldn't be commended for anything they've done so far, because frankly, as far as I'm concerned, none of it's been far enough, and there's many people too. Where's Mark Bergevin's phone call? Where's the other people we know were in those conversations? Sure. Good. I'm glad that there was swift and decisive action on Stan Bowman and on Quenneville once the report was out. That's good.
But there wasn't. Joe Quenneville was on the bench for a game.
That's
there
true.
wasn't.
That's true.
He played a game. He played. He was on the bench.
Sure.
And then decided not. Well, he wasn't going to be involved for a presser after not being able to speak. I'm sorry. If you're doing your job, that's part of your job. So if you're on the bench, then you show up after.
Yeah. No,
that was a scared little move of someone with no backbone.
Yeah.
And it's embarrassing.
Yeah. And I get. Look, I'll let Elliott, I'll let you get back in a second. I'll say one more thing. I understand from the legality part of it, why the Chicago Blackhawks are still being careful. They are in a lawsuit.
Yeah.
The point is, at this point, why are you in a lawsuit anymore? This is so evidently your responsibility. If you actually gave a shit about this, you drop the law. Like you would just settle. You would just accept the responsibility.
They may be in that place too. I think the public pressure is going to push them to that place. I mean, to be seen to be fighting a lawsuit with this guy after the credibility with with which he came forward on Wednesday, I just don't see it. I think the NHL is going to tell them they have to deal with it.
Maybe. I don't know, Elliott. We've seen a lot of this. Currently, Justin Trudeau is still fighting a lawsuit with the survivors of residential schools.
Yeah, it's true. And you're not wrong about that. And obviously it ends up always becoming a money issue, which to me is incredibly frustrating. The other thing I would say the NHL has done right in this situation is that they've elevated it to the level that it needs to elevate. Gary Bettman has seemed to be taking this on, and this is his thing and his fish, and he's going to own it. And in some ways that's good because